Hello, Must Readers! I'm Erin Popelka. I founded Must Read Fiction, a place for people who know that life is better with a novel in hand. And I have such a treat for you today. I am here with Anna Quinn, novelist and owner of the Writers' Workshoppe and Imprint Bookstore here in Port Townsend, Washington, where we are. Anna,
Hi,
thank
Erin.
you for having me.
Thank you for coming.
Oh,
I've been very excited about this, having you come all that way and to have an interview in the bookstore.
Oh my goodness. Well, I have been so excited about this because it's not like every day that you meet both a novelist and a bookstore owner, and a writer and teacher. And so we're getting into your bio. So Anna Quinn is a writer and teacher and owner of this beautiful bookstore, the Writers' Workshoppe, an Imprint bookstore here in Port Townsend, Washington. She has been writing and teaching writing for the last 30 years. Her first novel is The Night Child, this gorgeous book right here. And so we are going to talk about all of those things. So thank you. So I love to start at the beginning with these conversations. So when did you first know that you wanted to be a writer?
Oh my gosh. I feel like my mother taught me to write when I was very young, and it seems like I was around 4 or 5 years old.
Wow.
And she also taught us to read very early and took us to the library every week, and we got our big stack of books, and I love libraries and books so much.
Yes.
And right around that same time, she taught me to write, and I remember just feeling like a completely different person, and it felt so magical to me. And when I could see that you could connect letters and make words and then make stories, I was off and running. And so I feel I've been writing since I was very young.
Yes, and you sense that magic just kind of right off the bat.
Absolutely. I just couldn't stop.
Yeah.
I just felt like all I wanted to do was write and read and write and read.
Yes,
and go out of my fort.
Yes, and they do go very much so hand in hand.
Yeah.
As a writer and owner of a bookstore, you can see that process of both interacting with readers and creating the works that people will read.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating. Every aspect of it. And I remember too, something that my mother told me that was really stayed with me was how you can write the stories you want to be in. To write those stories where you see yourself. And that was always very interesting to me. So I often in my stories had swords, beautiful horses, and the stories I wanted to be in as a child. And then as I over time continued to do that. And I think even The Night Child, it represents that in a way.
Yeah. So tell me about The Night Child.
Well, The Night Child was really informed by my memoir, and the memoir I had worked on for a long time, over a decade, and I was writing that to kind of come to terms with my own past with childhood sexual abuse and dissociation, and also identity and how identity's formed and how we're shaped in our life, and all of it. But I found after a time that I was kind of writing that same narrative around and around again, and I started to feel like it was getting worn out, and I still felt something was missing. So when I teach and people get stuck, I usually say, try another form, play around with poetry, or try some fiction, write an essay. And so I decided to take my own advice. And I spend a lot of time in poetry. I love poetry, and I've always written poetry, but I hadn't written those themes for some reason. I do use a lot of nature in my poetry and other issues, but I hadn't written those themes. So when I started to do that, it opened up some ideas for a story, and that's The Girl with the Red Dress came out of poetry. And you'll see it when you read it. You'll see, probably can guess, oh, that's from poetry. So then when I started playing around with fiction, when I opened up to fiction, that's when this whole story just started streaming into my mind and my body, and I really couldn't write fast enough. So The Night Child itself came out pretty quickly, whereas the memoir was a big, long, but it was part of it. So I think it all went together.
Sure. Was it freeing a bit to switch from memoir, where you did have to stay true to the facts, to fiction, where you could embellish as needed and follow the story where it was leading you?
It was incredibly freeing. It was, I felt like I had a new life. I felt very inspired as a writer. I got my writer mojo back, but I felt well, one thing, it was incredibly freeing to get any voices off my shoulders, and that you can't really help have there when you're writing memoir. I mean, you can, I did in my first draft, but then when I started thinking, like, this is a story I might want to share, so I need to get to whatever truths I'm missing. But to have voices on your shoulder is difficult, and to also have, I wanted a more objective lens. So to move into third person, which I did in the novel, it was incredibly freeing. I felt like my imagination held so many possibilities and answers and truths. I just felt like I unlatched a complete new part of just my whole being. And it was phenomenal. I think the imagination is everything.
Sure.
Yeah.
And in a sense, probably the work of your memoir really set the table for the work of the fiction, right? In terms of giving your brain and your body and your mind like time to process those memories and process those experiences, and let that channel through the night child.
Exactly. Because I feel like the emotional aspects, the emotional truths from the memoir are completely in the novel. And that's what the parts we hold true, I think, in our fiction, is that's what's in our DNA, that's what's in our hearts and our minds. So the ideas, the experiences of being a mother and a teacher and a wife and a friend and a daughter are all in the novel, and I know those feelings deeply. So they were there, but it was just the characters and the people and the experiences shifted it a little bit. And so I could watch and see how they navigated, whatever the emotion was or the obstacle. I could see someone else navigate through that, and it was fascinating.
Sure.
Yeah.
So what surprised you in the writing of The Night Child, in terms of anything that happened with the characters or as the plot developed? Were there things that surprised you about writing the story?
Very much. Some of them I can't really say because it would almost spoil the book, but
yes, no spoilers.
Yeah, and this gets so quickly moves into spoiling them. Even when I'm out on tours or reading, there's very little I can read without letting one of the twists in. You know? But there was a huge surprise with shift in consciousness that. Where in the memoir I was in one consciousness and I was working towards something I felt like I needed to write about, but in the novel it was shocking to me how the consciousness shifted, and a part of that was shifting into Nora and shifting into Margaret, and that it was a shock, and it also really informed me with the issues going on right now, the massive movements with Me Too, and how our culture is shifting our consciousness too, with the focus on survivors and the victims, much more than we always gave so much attention to the perpetrators. And so it was just interesting to me how we can do that, with more information and changing perspectives.
Yes, absolutely. And so you mentioned two characters. So we have Nora and Margaret. Can you just give us a little flavor of these two characters?
Well, Nora is she's probably in her I know she is. She's about 36.
Yes.
And she's
ageless in your mind.
A young mother and an English teacher. And she begins to see hallucinations one day in her class of a child in a red dress. And so that is really the inciting incident for the book. That's what sets the whole narrative off, is she everything unravels because she doesn't know what this is. And so the story is about her seeking to understand those visions and what they meant.
Oh, so fascinating.
That's all I will say about her.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so you've mentioned the Me Too movement, and so this book came out in January, about 5 months ago, and so you've been on tour with the book and talking to readers and engaging with the world with it. So tell me a little bit more about those conversations and how readers have received the book.
Well, it's just been wonderful. Readers have been so responsive, and audiences have been really responsive and warm, and it's been just wonderfully rewarding. And the conversations, one of the hopes that I have for this book is it will open up conversations about sexual assault and mental illness too, because that's an aspect of this book. And it's been really, I feel very hopeful with how open people have been in talking about their own experiences and their willingness and to talk about it. And I can see the shift it makes to everybody listening to each other's stories, and also the strength it brings to the one speaking. When people, whether it's sending an email or talking in an audience about their story, you can feel strength and hope coming out. And that's what I wish.
Well, thank you, because I know it's a very brave and courageous thing to write a book like this and to be present and to send it in the world, especially coming from your story. So thank you for your courage.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And also a courageous thing to be an owner of a bookstore and to truly take a stand and say, I believe in books so much, I'm going to supply them for you.
So I ran out of room in my house is really what happened.
It did. So tell me about the story of the Writers' Workshop and Imprint Bookstore here in Port Townsend, Washington.
Well, it's been about 12 years now.
Wow.
And we started as a tiny little store called the Writers' Workshop, and that grew out of my own need for a writing group, because I just moved to Port Townsend and I just finished a draft of The Night Child, and I wanted to take it through a writing group before I sent it to an editor. I wanted it to be as polished as possible.
Sure.
And I didn't know anybody, so I put up a flyer and I said I would love to have if anyone's interested in a writing group, and please contact me. And I had an overwhelming response. Really, almost over 100 people responded.
Wow!
Oh my gosh! And so I thought, well, maybe we can all help each other get into groups. And I actually, because I didn't have the space in my house, rented a tiny space in an old Victorian building down the street. And that's when I kind of became a matchmaker. You're in sci-fi and you're in literary and you're in this, and we started helping people find groups. And then out of that, we started bringing in instructors, and then we needed a bigger space. And then a couple of years ago, we got to know the owners of this store, and we told them if they ever retire or leave to contact us, and they did. And so it was a good time for us, and so we merged the Writers' Workshop with Imprint Books, and it's been heaven.
Oh,
it's
fantastic.
Just magical.
Yes. And truly kind of a magical thing to interact with readers, because a lot of time with writers, you write the book and send it into the world and hope that it finds an audience, but you see your readers every day in and out of the bookstore.
Yes, we hear it all.
Yeah.
It's made me very aware, even more aware, how everybody, for whatever writers are working on, whatever they're writing, there's a reader for them. There's a reader for everybody, and it's fascinating to hear all the opinions that people have. It's harder when a lot of my friends' books are in here. All the books feel like friends to me, but people come in and comment on different books, or this one.
Sure. Maybe not knowing that they're talking to the author.
They'll get some coffee.
Right, indeed.
But no, I've learned a lot just about readers' tastes, and it's interesting, and it just keeps reaffirming how subjective the whole process is, and that for writers, it's the very best thing is to trust your own story and your own voice and put it out there and write what's coming through you. Not to write for an audience, because I think that's a slippery slope, and it's better to just own your story and put it out there, because there will be readers.
Sure, especially if you can trust that, right? That you can trust that you're creating a piece of art that will resonate with others.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah.
And so tell me, are there lessons that overlap between being a writer and being a bookstore owner and being a teacher of writing? Are there big lessons that emerge from all of those pieces of work that you do?
Oh my gosh. That's a tough one.
Sure.
But I would say, I guess the thing that keeps coming up for me is to do what you do without apology, to just trust in your gut and your instincts, and whether it's curating the books and bringing in books that we feel we're in love with and our customers are in love with, and to trust that, and with writing groups, all of it is, I think, the not apologizing for what's coming through you and standing by your story or your business or anybody, anything that you love, just stand strong by it, is probably the element that's come up for me the most, you know. And because I think from my past, trust was probably the most eroded element. And because you learn to trust yourself, you second guess everything because you don't have an identity that is strong. And so it's been a lot of work, and I would imagine lifelong work for me to keep developing my identity. But one thing I know is that I do have an intuitive sense about who I am, and to keep really listening to that voice within, which is big part of the Night Child. So I'm very aware of that voice now and listening carefully to that in all that I do, and hope that leads me in there. So it seems to be working right now. So
yes.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that is a beautiful lesson, and I think a beautiful lesson to close on. Do what you do without apology. So yes, and to you, must reader, do what you do without apology. Love the books that you love, and please do check out The Night Child. So
Anna, you're so wonderful.
Oh my goodness!
I hope that you could interview all the authors out there, and you're just a wonderful human. I can feel it.
Well, thank you. Well, Anna Quinn, thank you so much for this fantastic conversation, for this beautiful bookstore, and please keep doing the work that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much.